Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. I hope you're having a wonderful day. What we're going to try to do today is cover the week two books and talk about the ever loving blue eyed thing, the Daredevils, because Elektra happens to be wearing a Daredevil costume in this run, the Kingpin, who is one of the great villains in the Marvel universe, excuse me, and Shazam. We're not really going to do a history of Shazam. We're going to deal with Mary being the new champion of Shazam. And remember that Shazam gets mentioned in some of the Alex Grant videos as being sued out of existence. And we'll mention a couple of those things as we go through these videos. As always, all of these images are and quoted text are used for educational purposes. I'm not trying to make any money. I'm just trying to have a class about an overview of comic books. I want to tie up a few things from week one. I've talked several times about the overarching view for any class I put together is character, conflict, connection, and theme. And so I think we should make some connections to week one based on what we were reading. First of all, it's not the 1970s. Luke Cage, Power Man, in the 1970s was perhaps one of the best examples of blaxploitation. We talked about that in some of the comments. I interacted with a few people. I posted this link to this picture in the comments as well. Notice the sort of small afro. Notice that deep V-neck shirt, the garish costume. Notice in the 2020s, he looks the look is updated. Notice that the speech, there's no ands and gonnas. Everything is complete. He doesn't drop the ing. And he's running for mayor. He's a respected member of the community. He's not somebody just out to make a buck. Also, we mentioned the fact that Zaphram, Shazam, Gale being stuck as a little girl when she's utters the magic word, albeit a little girl with superpowers, versus Mary, who seems to be in her same form, whether she's Mary without saying Shazam or once she says Shazam. The Captain Marvel book, as somebody pointed out in the comments, Billy grows up into a mature adult as Captain Marvel, but he stays a high schooler when he is Billy Batson. It flips the or Golden Gale flips that scenario since Captain Marvel obviously came first. And I don't have time to go into it, but there's a whole series of legal battles with Captain Marvel. The Superman Captain Marvel battle that's mentioned in the Alex Grant videos, and the Marvel Captain Marvel battles where Marvel takes away the name Captain Marvel, uh, and now he is just known as the Captain. I believe I'll mention this again later. We also talked about what's a superhero and a supervillain. And the fight between Typhoid Mary, who is one of Daredevil's villains, and Elektra, who used to be an assassin, who used to be somebody that Daredevil fought with. Now Daredevil's married to her, and now Daredevil and she are co Daredevils, for lack of a better word. Both of them are wearing the Daredevil costume. And for a while, when Matt Murdock was in jail, she was the sole Daredevil. It's a beginning part of the book, I think, alludes to that a little bit. We also talked about the superhero's relationships with the law, how the anti hero was somewhat egotistical. And here we have Daredevil talking about their vigilante situation and the idea that they have to go places that other characters can't or other characters won't, where the cops can't or won't go, they as vigilantes can. But it puts them in a weird relationship with the law where, in a lot of ways, Mary is on the side of the mayor, on the side of the law. And we'll come back to that at the very end of this video on why superheroes can fight the law in a way that we mere mortals can't. Now I want to tie some of these books together. These are connections between the books. These are connections, some of them will play out over the course of weeks 3 and 4 as well. But these are connections between the books or connections that set up what's going to happen. Number one, let's talk about the kids. We have in the thing a kid who doesn't know what he is, but a kid who goes off and discovers what he is. When Doom looks and sees that he can't get the aura of the kid, and we find the kid here at the end understanding that he is to become a new powerful being, a new watcher. And in a lot of ways, this story of transformation wasn't central to the series, but it is a story of transformation that I think gets repeated in a lot of myth, and it'll be something that, again, we'll talk about next week. But we have a story of growth and a story of transformation as he grows from just a kid into the Watcher. Next, we have the Purple Man's kids. And one of them in particular, surviving the threat and becoming more powerful than his father, who is trying to wipe the minds of everyone at best or bend everyone to his will at worst. And I think it's important to understand that the children of the Purple Man want to make amends for what he has done. If you watched the Jessica Jones on Netflix, that miniseries, certainly the Purple Man was central to that. The Purple Man is central to here, and the idea of free will and the exercise of free will. Any time you have somebody who can take away one's free will, comics can explore that concept in a way that a lot of other genres can't. And finally, we get Darla. And Darla is talking about the fact that she's a superhero, if for no other reason than she stops the big bad with a well thrown object. We have the rabbit that annoys me quite a bit. But we also have Darla as the child with knowledge. She is the one who, from the mouth of babes, we get wisdom. She is the one that lets us know that it's not Lady this or Girl that or Miss Mar. And again, there's probably copyright issues with calling her Miss Marvel. She's none of those. She lets us as readers, she lets the viewing public of Philadelphia know that Miss Marvel, that Mary is the new Shazam. The other thing I think I want to take a look at, or one other thing I want to take a look at, is this idea that in these books, the heroes are aware. The heroes are aware of where they are and what they're doing. More importantly, they're aware of who they are as people. And let's take a look at 3 or 4 examples. First, the Thing. The Thing's awareness is what he isn't. He's not the Hulk. He's not Thor. He's not the Silver Surfer. In other words, he's not a cosmic sort of character. He's not a god like Thor. And he knows that the Hulk is stronger than he is, if for no other reason the Hulk has the ability to become infinitely angry. At the same time, because he knows what he's not, he knows that he can turn down eternity. He knows he can turn down living forever, something Thor can do, something the Silver Surfer can do. All he wants is to fight with the Yancey Street gang on a Saturday night. Have a few beers with She-Hulk. Do whatever it takes. He's a guy. He's a man who gets things wrong more times than he gets them right. That sort of awareness is something that I think the villains lack for the most part. And it might be one of the things that separates heroes from villains in comic books, the idea that the heroes are aware. Mary, she knows she's the thrown away daughter. She knows she's got second chance. She knows that her skill set is not just being Shazam, that it's being a planner, that it's being an overachiever. And she knows that using that skill set allows her to be a better superhero. Her humanity allows her to be a better superhero. She's got the strength of gods, the wisdom of Solomon, all of those things that Shazam gives her. She's better because of her human form, the love of the family, the idea she can plan, the idea that she's always been an overachiever. Daredevil knows that his actions have consequences, excuse me. He knows that turning up his nose at the law has created the situation that they're in, has created the superhero illegal, or acting as a superhero becomes illegal. Elektra knows that he has decided to wear a costume. He has decided to be an effing symbol. And because he's made these decisions to wear the costume and be a symbol, there are consequences that stem from that. They are aware in ways, again, that I don't think the Kingpin ever gets to be aware. I don't think Octavius Doc Ock ever gets to be aware. I don't think any of the villains in this piece ever get to be aware in the way that the heroes do. In week 2, I think it's important to talk about the idea that women become central to the story. The first superheroes, Superman, Batman, were men. Wonder Woman comes along later, and I'll talk a lot about Wonder Woman next week, but there was a whole stretch of time where she was depowered. There was a whole stretch of time where she was the secretary for the Justice League. That time has long since passed. Mary, obviously, she's not in the shadow of Billy Batson's Captain Marvel, a name that he can't use anymore because of legal reasons, or Shazam, or as he is in his new book, the Captain, because calling him Shazam meant that he couldn't say his name, otherwise, the lightning would come down and he would revert back to Billy Batson. She is central to this story. Obviously, the book's about her. But Elektra is central to bringing Matt back from the brink. She reminds him who and what he is. He is not an assassin. He is not someone who is going to kill the Kingpin. Or if he does kill the Kingpin, he will be changed in a way that he can't come back from. And that, I think, is important. So she is central to this story. Uh, there's a spin off part of this story, one of the extra issues, where she has her own little journey back in past to deal with Kraven. It's not part of your reading, but she's central to the whole event. Alicia is central to the whole event. She hits death upside the head. She is the one who understands what has happened. She is the one who takes Ben back for reasons that include the fact that she recognizes, she is self aware, that death was manipulating her mind, was taking away her free will. But she too is able to kick butt in a way that she wouldn't have been back 10, 20, 30 years ago. And Sue. The first time I came across the Fantastic Four was as a television cartoon in the 1960s. She was the invisible girl, and she just became invisible. The force field was pretty minor, but in this book, she is the one that gets them out of jail. She is the one who protects all of them in the final battle. She is the one who is central to this fight. And you can just look at the art and see she is in the middle of the fight. She is the central character in this fight. She, in a lot of ways, is the most powerful character on the page here and several other spots in this book. You can look at the panel, and she is central. She is the invisible woman. She is Sue. She is no longer a shrinking violet, an invisible girl who hides. Week 2 also talks about happy endings. And let's take a look at that for a second. The kids get them. The kids probably deserve them. But as you're reading, I think one of the things you're going to see, you shouldn't expect this panel, when they talk about Fisk, to hold up. The bad guys get away, and the good guys have to keep on fighting. The kids get a happy ending. Now, in some ways, Ben and Alicia get a new beginning. Alicia is self aware that death had the glamour on her, that they both get a second chance. They get a new beginning. The kid becomes the new Watcher, or on his way to becoming the new Watcher. Mary at the end flies off to a new crossover. Billy's in the middle of something, and she flies off to help Billy, who is Captain Marvel, who is Shazam, who is now getting his own series once again. But the fact of the matter is, she's not done either. She is off to fight again. There's a new chance, a new battle. And even though you might want to consider these spoilers, I think it's important that in a comic book, these endings always happen. You should expect this to happen at the end of an arc. And the important part in the comics is, how did we get to this point that the heroes go off to fight another day, that the villains go into hiding? The Daredevils are off to save the world. And there's a whole new arc where they join the Hand, they go off and battle the Fist. Don't ask. It's kind of hokey, I agree. And the Fist is led by Punisher. At the end, you have the Avengers coming in. They're going off, fighting their own battles. Once again, they're fighting. Meanwhile, one of the villains dies. We have this idea of evil glee. And the kid, wise beyond his years, points out that that's way too convenient. Evil glee somehow reminds me of a short story where the woman was told that her husband died in a train wreck, and when he comes walking through the door, she dies of a heart attack. And they talk about the idea that it was joy that kills, the joy of seeing her husband killed him. There's a certain irony there. When you get to the end of the Thing's run, you can see the irony of the woman here saying the evil glee killed him. We see that Doom gets what he says, nothing at all. And again, I don't think that's a spoiler. He just gets to walk away. And at the end, we have some nuance, and I think it's up to you as a reader, and you can certainly comment about this in the comments about whether Fisk was treated in a nuanced way, and or whether he was just a symbol of corruption and violence and rage. And you can probably comment about, well, what did Daredevil become a symbol of? But at the very end, and I don't think this is a spoiler, he and Mary are going to sail away to find their happiness. But I think it's important to understand that in comics, the bad guy always comes back. As I said at the beginning, it's characterization, conflict, and an illusion. We're going to talk about some characterization. We're going to talk about some conflicts. And we're going to wrap it up with a couple of allusions that I think tie some of this together. First of all, heroes have a code. And that code, I think, comes from this idea of the detective novels, especially the hard-boiled detective novels. And Walter Mosley, the guy who wrote the Thing arc that we're reading, is famous for writing detective novels. That code in the comics is that the heroes don't kill. The Punisher kills, but he's not a hero, he's an anti-hero. Elektra was an assassin, but she uses her words to stop Matt from killing, even though the Kingpin killed Matt's brother. We see that some of the villains, like the Rhino, have a code, as well. You don't hurt kids. You absolutely, positively don't hurt kids. That code gets carried out here by everyone except the Purple Man and the Kingpin. We're going to do what's right. Even though people have jobs that they're going to protect, the Thing and the Human Torch are going to do what's right. That's part of the code. And you see that code and its next element of that code when the Thing protects his friends. Mary, I think, has a code that people should be treated as an end unto themselves rather than a means to an end. They're not subjects, they're people. The bad guy sees them as homeless, they don't have the talent to rise again, so they have to serve a function. They are an end, they are a means to an end. They serve a function. Mary sees them as an end unto themselves, and she wonders why nobody notices. Her code includes loving people. Characterization. We talked about the Thing being a guy who loved Yancey Street, being a guy who recognized that he was a man who made mistakes, and he's a guy who's going to do what's right. In this case, they're going to break into the police station. They're going to rescue the Ben Reilly Spider-Man. I think the book deals with the Miles Morales Spider-Man. There's like 3 or 4 Spider-Men in this book. The Thing also kind of jokes about the convict cavalry. They're here to the rescue. There's a sense of bravado. With Daredevil, one of the central elements to this character is his faith. Foggy, his law partner, recognizes it. He puts himself in harm's way. By putting himself in harm's way, he too can work to be a hero. He reminds Daredevil that free will is central to this story. The Purple Man is trying to take it away. The Kingpin is trying to use the Purple Man to take it away. Foggy exercises free will, accepts the consequences of free will, and he reminds Daredevil that you've got your damn Catholic guilt. And Daredevil supports the assertion by talking about the second death, by talking about being in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, and being worried that he knows that that's what's waiting for him at the end. Daredevil has faith. He exercises his faith through his free will. It's a whole theological concept that's tough to squeeze into a book, but I think Zdarsky does a good job of making us think about faith and free will in this book. And one of the things you can comment on in the comments for this video is how well does Zdarsky deal with faith and free will? And certainly faith and free will is an eternal conflict. And it applies to the superhero who wants to be free to become what she was supposed to be, to strip away the outside influences, to get to the core of herself. Fisk wants the same thing. Being under the thumb of someone else is being under the thumb of all. The irony is, Fisk never sees that what he does with the Purple Man to everybody else is what he is trying to escape. Other heroes seem to have the awareness that the heroes, not other heroes. Fisk isn't the hero, Fisk is the villain. Heroes seem to have the awareness to get away from that. Finally, there's a real world issue. The Thing has all sorts of homeless people who are outcasts from the other world, the upper world, who come down underneath the city to heal. In the new episode or in the new Champion of Shazam, we have the homeless in the subway asking the question, who cares about us? And I think that question is central because Mary is the one who cares about them. And because she cares about them, she gets her family back and she defeats the big bad in her story arc. And then finally, as I wrap this up, Sue uses the line, the law's an ass. And I think it's important to remember that it's famous for being part of a Dickens book, but it also is part of a play written in the 1600s, and that this is a quotation, and that a lot of writers sprinkle literary quotations throughout. Be aware, look for those Easter eggs. And the idea of comics and dealing with death is central to the comic book and the superhero core. We're going to look at that in week 4, but it's set up here. I can't stop the living from fleeing death. I can't stop the superheroes from fleeing death, but death will always be there, and the superheroes are going to find ways to deal with it and try to beat it. During the presentation, I talked about comments and reactions. I talked about free will. I talked about character codes. The happy endings. Do any of the adult characters deserve a happy ending? Why or why not? Shazam has a certain innocence. Do you prefer that to the grittiness of the Daredevil and Elektra characters? Why? Or why not? Which relationship? Fisk and Mary, Daredevil and Elektra, Reed and Sue, the father-son relationship between Fisk and Butch, Ben and Alicia. When we were defining superheroes, we talked about having a secret identity. We have the Fantastic Four, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, acting without secret identities. We have a host of characters who wear masks to preserve their secret identities. Do you prefer the open identity? Do you prefer the secret identity? Explain why. Once again, I hope you all have a good week. If you have any questions, please remember that this week I'll have the office hours on Zoom Tuesday morning. I will be in my office Wednesday afternoon. If you have any questions, feel free to stop up in Bede and talk to me there. Again, if you want to shoot me an email, I'll do my best to answer it. I hope that these are clarifying some of the issues we're dealing with. I hope that this overview helps you enjoy the books a bit more, and I hope you have a good week.